Well, Jim Donnan had a bunch of struggles with Tennessee back in the day when he was the head coach at Georgia, but he's correct about this right here about the Vols. He said that they're going to be the biggest challenge for Georgia in the 2022, or one of the biggest challenges for Georgia in 2022 season. He said Tennessee can stretch Georgia the most. Their offense is going to be very explosive. You got that right. It's going to be a challenge for Georgia. Now, that game's in Athens, so it's going to be tough for Tennessee to win it, but still, this is going to be one of the challenges for the Dogs in 2022. Jim Donnan had a real hard time. I mean, Jim knows well how important that game is for Georgia, and he had a real hard time with good Georgia teams taking out Tennessee, and Tennessee at the time, don't forget, was one of the premier teams in college football. They now that slipped away pretty quick, it seemed, but well, not that quick, but quick enough, I guess, for if you're Phil Fulmer. You know, Jim Donnan's only win over the Vols was in 2000, and that was when the everybody got onto the field, and you know the wounded hedges, as Larry Munson would call it. But that moment right there, that was not the end of Tennessee football as we knew it, but it was the beginning of the end. Mark Richt polished him off with the hobnail boot. Well, Nick Saban did in the SEC championship game, preventing Tennessee from playing for a national championship again. So you never know when something comes to an end, right? For Tennessee coming into this season, no, I do not think they'll win the East. I do not think they will. They may win. They may be second. I don't know. They have a real mental block with the Gators for some reason. I mean, Florida has beaten them way more times than they should have over time. Uh, it really just doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm looking right now at the Tennessee Florida rivalry. The Vols have beaten them once since 2015. That is pretty well inexcusable. And by the way, while most of the time the Florida teams were what I would call significantly better, I mean, you talk about the close of the 2000s, they definitely were way better than Tennessee ever thought about being. You know, like in 2017, Tennessee losing that game on the Hail Mary, I think it was. They lost to Tennessee in 2015 by a point. They lost to 2014 by a point. I mean, they have just not competed in a way. They have not won, and sometimes they have not even competed. And that's a question too moving forward with Georgia. I mean, again, since 2005, Tennessee's really struggled with their rivals. They have not beaten Nick Saban ever. Uh, that's not good. I mean, that's a real challenging situation if you are Tennessee and you look at where you are in the world. Because if you're going to be successful and you're Tennessee, you're going to need to beat Alabama. Uh, Tennessee has won twice since 2010 against Georgia. That's it. And, you know, they've not been the better program. I know that. But isn't that kind of the problem, right? I mean, this is this is uh this is the problem for the Vols moving forward. They have now a capable head coach. They have had the head coach previously was not qualified to be a head coach. All right, he was the head coach, didn't mean he should have been. And then they had before that Butch Jones, who was certainly qualified to be a head coach, just didn't win the way they wanted him to. So we'll see with Heupel moving forward. But I know from folks inside at Georgia that the one game they pay attention to is Tennessee because the reason why they pay attention. Let me put it this way: the reason why they pay attention against Tennessee is because of the offense of Tennessee. So when Jim says Tennessee can stretch Georgia the most, their offense is going to be very explosive. When you look at Georgia's schedule in 2022, so it's always so hard to spit the last letter out there. Um, there's not a lot of people that are going to be in Georgia's way. Um, there's just not. Now, Oregon could give them some issues for sure, but after that, I mean, you don't see a lot of explosive offenses on this thing. I mean, that's not the way Kentucky plays. That's not the way. Maybe South Carolina will become more explosive because they have a guy that really can be explosive in Spencer Rattler. All right, so maybe Carolina becomes a more explosive team. But Oregon, yeah, maybe. But Bo Nix, I think Georgia knows how to deal with him. Sanford, no. Carolina, Kent State, Missouri wants to be that way, but Auburn, I mean, we'll see. I doubt it. Vanderbilt, no. Florida, look, it does look like Anthony Richardson's going to be their guy at quarterback. That did not go last season. We'll see if that gets better. Then you got Tennessee. Mississippi State obviously could be very explosive at times. And then Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky plays the same way that Georgia does. So I don't know that I would confuse them with being overly explosive. Georgia Tech, that's going to be bad. But this is, coming into this thing, who is the most challenging team? How can Georgia repeat like this? Obviously it's not a repeat, but you want to settle games like the Tennessee game need to go away quick. You don't want to be in four-quarter fights with the Vols at home. Now, that can happen. This is what we talk about in DAWGSTRUCTION. You can pick up DAWGSTRUCTION. The link is down below. Make sure you support us. That's the best way and easiest way to support us. Tennessee has shown the ability to score and do so quickly in the first 9 games of the year. That got the attention of Georgia's coaching staff, and they heading to Knoxville for the second and final true red game of the year. It's like Kirby and Saban's kryptonite, one assistant said of the offensive balls run. It can be really tough to deal with. That was with this, monumental defense. Tennessee has gotten better. Everybody wants to make their jokes. I guess okay. Well, I get it. Whatever. But the truth is, they've gotten better. Why? Because they have a capable head coach that understands that he can build a program. I think the criticism of Tennessee is they're not recruiting at the level they need to in order to have success in a big way against Georgia and Alabama and I guess Florida. For Tennessee, their seasons are based very specifically on, do you beat Georgia, Florida, and Bama? If you don't, and by and large they have not, you're not having a successful season. If you do, then you've had a successful season. Tennessee's most successful season in the last, I don't know about this century. That's probably not the best way to look at it. But recently was the same season they beat Georgia and Florida in the same year. And that was, I believe that was 2015 or 16. So that that's not come around a lot for the Vols lately. Now that didn't come around a lot for the Vols even in the 90s when they were a superior program to where they are right now. But you look back, Butch Jones had back-to-back 9-4s. That is the best season that he's had that Tennessee's had since 2007. They've only had this century, they've only had 1, 2, 3, 4 10-win or better seasons. That's it. So, did they pull the trigger too quick on Butch? I don't know about that. He was 4-8 in his final season. The problem was they followed up with Jeremy Pruitt, who went 5-7, 8-5, and then laid a total turd at 3-7. Heupel at 7-5. Maybe they're going to get where they want to go or need to go. I don't know. But those 2 seasons, just for the Vols, in 15, they beat Florida 28-27. You remember Butch celebrating? I don't know if you remember that or not. Excuse me, they lost to Florida 28-27, and then they beat Georgia. In 16, they lost to Alabama, Texas A&M, and Carolina and Vanderbilt. But they beat Georgia and Tennessee. Tennessee beat Georgia and the Gators in back-to-back weeks. I very clearly remember Butch Jones getting up in the stands and directing the band. And then they lost 3 straight games in a row after their miracle in Athens. So on the last play of the game with the astronaut whose name escaped me. But look, it is a challenging thing. It is a real thing. And it's something to pay attention to for Georgia in 2022. But the game is later in the season. We'll see how Tennessee progresses as time goes on.